Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Wednesday, June 8th, and if you've been listening for a while, you know this is not the normal voice joining us because George is not here today. I am Cody Roadcap, and I am joined by Tyler Snyder. Tyler, how are you doing?
Hey man, I'm good. Any week that I can be here and George isn't is like the best podcast we could possibly have. No, I'm just kidding, George.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love George. He's somewhere on a cruise. I don't know where he's at. He has no cell phone reception. He pretty much just straight abandoned us, but I can't blame him. But Tyler and I are holding down the fort. It's going to be a great episode. We have in store some NFL news. All three of us did break down our early running back rankings. We'll give you 1 through 15 this week, 16 through 30 next week. So make sure you check out that one. As always, you can find the full rankings and more information on the Couch GMs at thecouchgms.com or on our social media channels. But Tyler, let's get right into it with the NFL news. Alrighty, and kicking off NFL news, we have mandatory mini camps are opening this week. I believe 16 teams started out with mini camps on Tuesday, and the big headline coming out of Tuesday was DK Metcalf was not in attendance as he is looking for a new contract extension. Debo Samuel, however, was, and he was the big name all offseason. Snyder, are you concerned at all that DK might not be in Seattle come season time?
I think it's just, it's a leverage ploy. He's just trying to get that new contract. And I do believe he's going to get the contract he wants and be able to sign long term, especially with Russell Wilson moving on to the Broncos. I mean, that frees up some cap space that they'll be able to afford DK longer term. And I mean, this is a guy that's your future. It's not just a good wide receiver. If we're talking about like a Julio Jones here, or even you can talk about the Packers with Devontae Adams. If you're talking about an older wide receiver, um, might be coming to the end of his prime, might not have too many years left, then maybe I can see letting him move on or trying to trade him, trying to get some value out of him. But a guy like DK Metcalf, he's still young, he's still in the heart of his prime. He is not a guy you want to lose. So I see them retaining him completely. But man, just for fun, what if they didn't? What if DK held out all year? Or what if they ended up trading him too because of contract issues? How bad do you think the Seahawks would be this season?
Man, that would be something crazy if they did move on from DK. You did mention he's 24 years old, or he's a young guy at 24 years old. So a cornerstone of their future, their franchise. You don't see those guys moved. But Drew Lock to Tyler Lockett and D. Eskridge and a few other guys, that'd be rough. I mean, I think they're already, no offense, in competition for a top three pick heading into next season. I mean, things can change drastically whether you like him or not. Pete Carroll has shown he can coach pretty well, at least the defensive side of the ball. It's the offense that'll have to come together. They could surprise somebody, but they're definitely going nowhere if DK is not on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, but he's not the only exciting wide receiver that we were worried about coming into camp. There's actually arguably a bigger wide receiver because of what he did last season, how versatile he was, and that was Debo Samuel, but he actually did attend 49ers camp. I kind of expected him to hold out because he demanded a trade. Well, I guess not demanded, but he asked for a trade. I know he's having issues with his contract and his usage, so I'm kind of surprised that he showed up, but I like seeing it.
Me too. This one was a huge surprise for me. I know the CBA has changed some things, and it's harder to hold out, and you actually lose more money than you used to. With it being mandatory, so he's not going to take a hit in his paycheck or anything like that. But for where we were just a few weeks ago on like he's never playing another down for the 49ers, he's never doing this, to not even 2 months later, he's at training camp. I think that's a huge shout out to whatever they've done in the front office trying to mend that situation. Whether there's a huge contract coming, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe it's just a guarantee, hey, look, you can play wide receiver. Well, there's no more than 5 carries a game for running back. I mean, that's something we'll have to think about as we get more into the fantasy aspect of it. But I'm with you. I was shocked that he showed up on Tuesday.
And I guess it could just be a different way of looking at things, but let's say you're a GM of another team and you're looking at trading for Debo Samuel. Maybe he still does want to be traded. Um, the kind of haul that Debo is going to bring in, the amount of first round picks, big name players, whatever else it'll be, that is going to be required to get a guy like Debo Samuel. If you're a GM of another team, do you want to pay out all this capital for a guy who is going to just sit out and not play for you whenever he doesn't get what he wants? Or are you going to want to go pay for the guy that's like, hey, I'm unhappy, but I'm still going to give you my all? Like, that's the guy I'd want to go get. So I don't think, even if he does still want to be traded, I think this actually looks better for his character. It might force the 49ers hand less, but it makes him a more attractive option to go get if you're a different GM.
Hey, I think that's a valid argument and something we'll have to wait and see how it unfolds over the next couple of weeks. Maybe he'll be in San Fran all season long, which I think will be good for the 49ers and for fantasy. But, another guy that just can't keep his name out of the headlines, we've been talking about him a lot. Deshaun Watson, has another case filed against him this week. It is now up to 24. And this one, unlike the others, seems to come more of a surprise to his legal team and the Browns. We don't need to rehash what all is going on or anything like that. But I know there's already been talks now that huge contract he signed, they're going to start looking at the void language because this one has been such a surprise. So Deshaun Watson, this whole issue, it seems like we're further from it being over than we might have thought a few weeks ago.
It's weird timing to me. It's strange that, you know the lawsuits came out. You had 23 people step forward, and yet after it all seems to blow over, and then he's going to go back to playing football. That's when a 24th person shows up. I think the timing's really weird for this one. If you were involved in the situation and it was so public as it was, why not step forward earlier? Um, so, I don't know. These situations are so tough because we've seen in the past where these kinds of things happen and you have so many people come forward and say, "Hey, I was involved too," when they really weren't because they're trying to get money. But you also have people that are, just afraid to speak up for years because of the trauma that they went through. So it's hard to tell in today's day and age how much of this is true, how much of it isn't. But the timing of it is just what seems so shocking to me. Why you would come up so late.
Yeah, I know HBO. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. Did run like inside the case. I forget the name of the show they did about the Deshaun Watson instance, and that's when they got the 23rd person after that. So now a week or two later, they got the 24th. So maybe because we're so tied into the NFL, like we're around it every day. It's what we enjoy. It's been in the headlines the whole time, but maybe someone else, maybe these people didn't find out about it until the HBO thing, or maybe they weren't aware of their options or something like that. But like you said, there's a lot of truths to be unfold, whether it's the Deshaun Watson or the alleged victims. And honestly, that's what we need to come out. We need the truth to be figured out. And if he is found guilty, he deserves every punishment of it. If he's found innocent, then he deserves to continue playing football. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting the truth out, and that's what we're hoping for here at the Couch GMs podcast. Is just getting the truth out there, and if there is any acts of you know sexual misconduct or these civil cases are against, that those victims get some sort of relief, if there is any out there. But on a little bit of more of a brighter note, it is a sad day, but more of positive remembrance. We did have some retirements to talk about. Two big names, guys that you might not even think about for the Hall of Fame, but what they did um, over their long tenured careers. And the first guy is probably a Hall of Famer. That is Frank Gore. He retired. He signed a 1-day contract, returned to the 49ers to go out after 16 seasons. And he is the third all time rushing leader, a guy that tore his ACL twice before stepping on the NFL field to last 16 seasons is incredible. The Hall of Fame we debate, it have to be the top of your position for, multiple years in a row or something like that is what it should be. But for how long Frank Gore did it at the level he did, being third all time, what are your thoughts? Is Frank Gore a Hall of Famer?
I feel like he is. I mean, you might not think of him as a Hall of Famer if you're using recency bias. If you try to think of him over the last 3, 4 years, maybe you're like, I don't think he did enough to make the Hall of Fame. But you got to remember, he was in the league for 16 seasons and he played at such a high level, one of the more dominant running backs in the league for so long before these last few years. But it's crazy what he did over the past few years, too. Because, I mean, no, he didn't put up the eye popping numbers that you'd like to see from running backs. And no, he might not have been a fantasy starter in every league, but this guy, every time he would go to a team, we'd be like, oh, well, the top two starters got hurt, and Frank Gore is now playing, but He's so old. We don't have to worry about him. We don't have to expect anything from him." And then he would do well. And then he would just, put up 100 yards rushing and uh, be the bell cow again. And he was just able to continue doing it through his whole career. We talk so much about Tom Brady being able to continue doing it at such a high level. And nothing against Tom Brady, but Frank Gore plays a position where you take a hit on every single play that you're in. I mean, you get handed the ball, you're taking a hit or you're getting a touchdown, one of the two. Um, so to be able to continue playing for this long and playing so effectively, kudos to Frank Gore. Amazing career, and yeah, I do believe he is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree. I agree completely with what you said there. The next guy is Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he might not be a quote unquote NFL Hall of Famer, but what he meant to the NFL, his personality. I mean, if there's a Hall of Fame backup position, he definitely is worthy of that. He bounced around the league. He would come in, he would spot start. He's helped develop as a backup slash starter, develop some guys. Um, his the whole Tampa Bay and his outfit, that will be like those pictures will live forever in the NFL lore. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, 17 seasons, and I forget, I can't remember the exact number of teams, but I know it's in the double digits of teams that he got to play for.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And I mean, Fitzpatrick did play for the Titans, so I can speak from personally watching him for one season that, like, when your team was in quarterback hell and you didn't have a guy, you were in between quarterbacks. He was a great guy to step in. You hear that your team signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, and you're like, you know what? Maybe this year isn't going to be a wash. We are still going to be able to compete. We are still going to win games. Our receivers are still going to be able to put up stats. Or, if he was a backup and you hear the starter goes down and Ryan Fitzpatrick's in, you never heard us fantasy players go, well, I'm not starting that receiver anymore. He just lost all his value. No, because Fitzpatrick was able to step into any team at any time and still perform. He was so fun to watch. He was such a good personality, like you said. Hopefully, he makes it to the booth in some way so that we can, listen to him talk for a while because I feel like he'd be definitely an entertaining guy, definitely an entertaining personality. But another person, congrats on an awesome career, Ryan Fitzpatrick. We're going to miss you.
Definitely, and it was just I mean, last season, it does stink that he goes out after an injury season, a pretty tough hip injury with the Washington football team last season, now known as the Commanders. But 2 seasons ago when he was going back and forth with Tua, like, if you knew he was gonna play from start to finish, he was a top 5, top 10 fantasy quarterback, like, you could play him. It was the fact that they were bouncing back and forth that was making it so hard whether or not to trust him, but Snyder hit the nail on the head. A tough guy. We're definitely going to miss it. And the booth will be fun. I would definitely love to see him paired up with Patrick or Pat McAfee for something around the NFL. I think that would be
That'd
a
be
lot
so
of
fun.
fun, almost like a Manning cast. But those two guys, I think, would be a ton of fun. And our last bit of news, though, before we get into the main segment of the show, is Aaron Donald, the guy that hinted at retirement, but some say was just a contract, negotiation tactic, got paid, became the highest paid non-quarterback position player ever. He received a $40 million raise and is set to make 95 million throughout this contract that runs through 2024. 65 million guaranteed over the next 2 seasons. I mean, what can you say? The dude is the best defensive player in the NFL, and he's being compensated like it. Um, did you ever think he actually had a chance of retirement, or do you think this was all about getting the 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 bag, as they like to say?
No, I mean, we talked about it a little bit at the end of last season when we first heard the rumors of him talking about retiring. And I said then, and I stand by it now, I never thought he was going to retire. Um, he was just playing at such a high level. He is top five candidate for Defensive Player of the Year every single year. And he was again last year. It's just, if you're playing at that high of a level, why would you want to quit? I mean, we've seen players before say, I feel like I've done enough. I got enough money. I don't want to like kill my body for the rest of my life. I mean, I get that, but I feel like Aaron Donald is one of those guys that just loves the game so much and he takes such good care of himself that honestly I feel like he'll have a better retirement than other players because of how well he's kept his body together. But I didn't see him retiring. Maybe it's just because I can't picture the NFL without him. He's one of the faces of the NFL, and I just couldn't picture without him. I think he's going to continue to dominate, and in 2 years he's going to talk about retiring, or even in three, he's going to talk about retiring again. And even then, it's going to be hard for me to believe that he's going to retire unless he really falls off over the next few years.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one, and that's not to take away. I think he definitely deserved this contract extension he got.
For
He's probably
sure.
the most valuable non-quarterback player across any NFL team. But Snyder, that'll wrap up our news segment. So why don't we get right into our early running back predictions? And George will be joining us for this segment. Alrighty, and George is joining us now to discuss some running back rankings. On this show, we're going to do 1 through 15, and then on next week, you have to stay tuned for that one for 16 through 30. And then we go all the way up to 60 on the couchgms.com. So make sure you're checking that out. Unlike last time when we were doing quarterback rankings, we're split on who is the number one running back. Our rankings have Johnathan Taylor, myself, and George have him ranked number one. Tyler has him ranked number two. So, Snyder, why is Johnathan Taylor not your number one guy?
Look, it's nothing against Jonathan Taylor. It's more so just my love for Derrick Henry, and that's not a homer pick. It's legitimate fantasy stats. I mean, this guy was the number one fantasy running back 2 years running, and then followed that up with being the number one running back in all of fantasy for the first 6 weeks of last season until he got hurt. Um, I mean, you can go back and look at the stats of the first 6 weeks, and Derrick Henry to Jonathan Taylor, it doesn't compare. And then it took Jonathan Taylor, I think, don't quote me on this, I think it was 4 weeks of Derrick Henry being injured before he even caught up to Henry's yard total. Might have been three, but it's a crazy amount. So, Derrick Henry is one of the hardest working people in the offseason. If there's anybody that can recover from an injury and make it look like it never happened, it's going to be this guy. Yes, he looked a little shaky in the playoffs, but he was recently removed from an injury. He was right at that cutoff and hadn't played in a while. So it's hard to judge him on that. The dude has just shown it on a very consistent basis. Again, it's not that anything is against Jonathan Taylor. I just think Derrick Henry is a little bit better.
All right, yeah, you already brought up Henry's our number two in our ranking, so I can continue the conversation arguing the two. I do have Taylor one, Henry two, but I mean maybe some of that is recency bias. I almost view them as a coin toss. It's very very close. If I had to pinpoint a reason why I put Taylor at number one, it's probably because Henry's not known for catching as many passes. We're using half PPR format. That does give Taylor a slight boost to catch up to Henry. Henry might get more yards. Their touchdowns will probably be near the same. So the catches is what's going to give Taylor that little boost. It's very close. It's not even like I'd say, oh yeah, it's definitive number one. Henry's not that good. Henry's not going to come back from the injury because I don't think any of that's true. It's just very slight edge. It could flip. They're both very safe picks.
Yeah, I think honestly, well, for me, I have three guys that are tier one running backs. The rest, I think, can all be, they all have their question marks, and some of the guys in tier one have question marks. I think all three of them. Jonathan Taylor was my number one guy. A lot of the reasons I agree with George on that. Um, I just think he's the safe option. He's the guy that you can count on. Derrick Henry is coming off of an injury. He is getting up there in age in terms of running back. 28 is not old by any means, but in terms of running back, it is. And is there going to be some fear out of we saw the amount of attempts that he was getting last year where he was pretty much 4 weeks after his injury, he was still had the most attempts by any running back. So that looks great for fantasy. But is there going to be some fear from the team to want to give him that? Are they going to try to work in uh, some other players? They didn't draft a running back until later in the draft, so I'm not too worried about a rookie overtaking him. Um, and he is a big dude, and big dudes often have a hard time coming back from injuries. But like Snyder mentioned, he is like a human miracle with the way his body is built. So if anyone can recover, it's definitely him. So it's not a knock on Derrick Henry that he's actually number three for me, number two on our list. But Jonathan Taylor just feels like the safest pick. And then Derrick Henry, as we mentioned, would be number two. And then the guy who I have ranked number two will go into is number three on our list, and that is Christian McCaffrey. Um, Snyder has him all the way down at six, and George has him at three. So me and George are kind of in the same top three. I'd love to hear Snyder's opinion. But first, I'll defend why I put McCaffrey slightly ahead of Derrick Henry. Again, this is my top tier. One, two, three, I think are locks in the first round. I think these rest of the running backs, like obviously 4, 5, and 6, will probably go in the first round. But if you convince me that, running back 7 goes ahead of running back 4. I think they're a lot closer. And these 3 are your league winning running backs. Now, granted, there's health concerns with Christian McCaffrey, but there's also health concerns with Derrick Henry. So I gave a little bit of an edge to the pass catching ability. Um, so I understand Derrick Henry had 1 season of injury. Christian McCaffrey has had 2. If he has a third one, like, I think it would be done putting him at the top of this list, but he's still 25. He's still young. He's still the face of that Carolina Panthers offenses. He can easily go for 1,000 and 1,000. So for me, he has a little bit more upside. Derrick Henry might be a little bit safer coming off the injury, but I think Christian McCaffrey would be a little bit more upside. That's why he's number 2 on my list, but number 3 on ours.
Yeah, I have him at 3. I'll go here before Tyler because I think I might have an idea of where he's going to go. I'm going to try to guess because the injuries, and we saw it took 3 years to get Saquon Barkley knocked out of that top tier, top 5 running backs. And a lot of people are saying it was too late because last year they got burned by Saquon Barkley. I think, are you like looking forward towards it? Or do you think we have McCaffrey too high because of the same reason? Because we're worried about him staying on the field despite the upside, knowing he could be a league winner if he does play?
Yeah, it's definitely the injuries. I mean, I can't sugarcoat it. I love Christian McCaffrey. Um, we talk about Derrick Henry's usage being a question mark against him because he gets used too much and now he's coming off an injury. Now you're talking McCaffrey coming off 2 injuries, and this guy is literally their entire team. Like the Panthers with and without McCaffrey is 2 completely different teams. He is their passing game, he is their rushing game, he is everything. So he is used just as heavily. If he's not used as heavily as he was, then I don't think he's as high a ranked running back as he is now. But if he is used as heavily, I don't think he can stay on the field. I just he's had injury concerns now. He's been in the league for 5 years, um, and he's only started all 16 games twice uh, out of those 5 years. Granted, his rookie season it was because he didn't start for the beginning of the season, but that's besides the fact. I just the last 2 years, I feel like whoever took McCaffrey ended up getting burned and losing the league. And because of that, if I am a if I have a chance to draft McCaffrey, I'm going to go with somebody safer. Some of these other guys that are next on the list because I just feel like they have a better chance of staying on the field. I mean, there's injury concerns with every running back. Let's just put that out there. You were talking about a guy that gets hit on every play, pretty much. So there's injury concerns for everybody. I just feel like there's injury concerns more for some people than others. There's also some other running backs on this list that have been injured pretty much every year that we still have ranked high, and I will defend them as well. But for me, I just don't want to be the one burned by McCaffrey yet again.
I actually like the way you said it too when you're talking about usage because almost it seems like McCaffrey isn't at the fault of his own, but because he gets 30, 35 touches a game, it doesn't show on the stat sheet quite as much as a Derrick Henry does because Derrick Henry's getting that in carries. And most of the time we're talking running backs, we're looking specifically at carries. McCaffrey, on the other hand, is getting a good bulk of carries, but he's also catching or getting 10 targets a game. So it kind of hides how many times he touches the ball in a game. And he almost would be more effective and more of a safe pick if you know that he's going to be limited to 20, 25 touches a game, especially if some of them are still catching the ball at the backfield because that's bonus points for fantasy. But we don't know if Carolina learned their lesson enough to do that. So I get that. The upside's why I still have him at 3, but you legitimately have a point there.
I also think we need to look at his rushing as well. Like we know he's a pass catching back. I get that. Cool. But running is still very important. Now we have him super high. Is that because Christian McCaffrey deserves to be this super high? Like, I mean, let's try to be honest here. Or is it because of one season? So, I mean, if you look back at his 2019, he dominated. He was so good that we still are looking at him like he has to be a number one running back. He had 15 touchdowns that year rushing. He had 2 in his first season, 7 in his second season, 5 in 2020, and 1 last year. He had 15 in 1 year. Like that's not a number that is easily replicated unless you got a guy like a Derrick Henry or a Johnathan Taylor that you are putting in on the goal line every single time. So last year in 7 starts, he had 99 rushing attempts, 1 touchdown. He had 37 receptions, 1 receiving touchdown. So if he's not going to get the touchdowns that he did before, is he really as valuable as he used to be? Does he really deserve to be a top 3 running back?
Who is the top 2 running back for me, so yes, he does.
No, no, I feel like I'm gonna sound like I'm backtracking when I'm saying this, but the amount of touches is a big reason why we're still like, yeah, he has that ability as well. Because I'm talking about a guy that touches the ball 35 times a game, and that's also a downside for him, but it's an upside because we see so many running back by committees, which I'm sure we're going to start talking about even this episode, because there's so few backs that are exclusive. So he's that far up just because we know that the opportunity's there, unlike a lot of people. But you're right that he really hasn't replicated it since 2019. Part of it because of injury, or maybe even it was just a fluke season. We're not sure.
I mean, let's go ahead and roll into our fourth running back because that's how I'm going to compare it. So, our fourth running back on the board is Minnesota Vikings running back Dalvin Cook. I have him at 3. Cody and George each have him at 4. So, we're all pretty close on where he's at. Now, the reason I would take a guy like Dalvin Cook over Christian McCaffrey is yes, he also has injury concerns. I 100% agree. He has been injured pretty much every season. He has never started a full 16 game season. However, he still plays more. His injuries seem to be a little more minor. It's like 1 week injury, 2 week injury max. It's rarely ever the long term injury like we see from Christian McCaffrey. And out of the last 3 seasons, 2 of them, he had double digit rushing touchdowns. So it wasn't just he had one big touchdown season and then disappeared. Like he was able to replicate that. So we know that it is a lot more likely. I also like in Carolina, if I'm playing defense, I'm shutting down Christian McCaffrey number one. That's it's not a choice. Like I'm going for McCaffrey. That's it. If they want to try to beat me anyway else, good luck. But if I'm going against the Vikings, like you try to shut down Dalvin Cook, suddenly Justin Jefferson is running down the sideline. You're not going to touch him. I feel like they have more of a pass game. They also have Adam Thielen. They have more of a pass game, so you can't just stack the box. You can't just load it for Dalvin Cook because you do have to take that pass game seriously, which I think also opens up some run lanes for Dalvin Cook a little bit more than Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying there too. I think in terms of like comparing the two, why I have Christian McCaffrey a little bit higher is because I think there is some options behind Dalvin Cook that you mentioned he doesn't play full seasons either, so we're not the injury thing is up for debate. Yes, Christian McCaffrey in 2020 only played 3 games, but he led all of fantasy in points per game. He was top. He was a running back 1 in points per game last year when he did play. So when he did play is a big aspect of it. But I think when he's on the field, he still produces at a high level. I think that's why he's still up there. You know, Saquon came back and we were like, oh, it was an injured season, and he never really put up those numbers. When Christian McCaffrey is on the field, he puts up those numbers. You can say the same thing about Dalvin Cook, and I think they are very similar. He is the number 4 running back. He would be the 4th one taken off my board. And but I think there is Alexander Mattinson still on the team, number 26. So I still don't know how to pronounce his name. He was a young guy that they really liked last year. I think there's more options. They could be going more running back by committee. Remember, their new head coach is coming from the the 40, not the 49ers, the Rams system, where they just came off a season having Sony Michel, Cam Akers for the playoffs, and Daryl Henderson. They rotate their running backs. We've seen Dalvin Cook work out in the passing game, the wide receiver a little bit. They might change up his role with the new system. That's why I knocked him down to number 4. But again, these are the top 4. I think we can all. Well, Tyler doesn't agree with Christian McCaffrey, but these are the top 4 that are locks to go in round 1. I think after this point, we're going to get to some guys that like they might be in round 1 running backs, and then after that, or they could fall in round 2, and it just depends on the league that you're in.
Yeah, just one more point on McCaffrey, and then I will move on. I'll shut up about it. But just you said that you feel like Mattinson is, going to steal some carries from Dalvin Cook. They have that other option there. I don't think we can discount Chuba Hubbard. Like I understand that once McCaffrey came back from his injury, Chuba wasn't playing as much last year, but Chuba did great last year in McCaffrey's absence. He was a really good fantasy running back. I mean, he helped lead some people to the playoffs if you were able to snag him off the waiver wire. And now he has a full offseason under his belt. knowing what he can do, being able to work in this offense, they can definitely design more plays for him. I do think that he can be a bigger part, especially if they don't want to use McCaffrey as much to try to keep his usage down so he doesn't get injured. Chuba could be a bigger factor, especially with the love of running back by committee, Georgia's favorite thing in the world,
All of
becoming
our
more and
favorite
more
thing
of
in
a
the
thing.
world.
Oh, it's terrible. I do think we need to. I'm not saying Chuba's going to steal McCaffrey's job. Not saying that at all. But I do think he can steal some carries, steal some playing time from McCaffrey. So he might not be quite as valuable as he used to be if he's not on the field as much. But that is it on McCaffrey. I will move on. So we go to our number 5 running back. I have him ranked the highest out of the three of us. I have him at 4. You guys each have him at 5. But I'm going to let George talk about him because it's one of his favorite guys. It is Austin Eckler, the running
He's a
back of
Chargers fan.
Georgia's favorite team, the Chargers.
I hate you all. But
He means the
really,
host, not the listeners, by the way.
yeah,
Yes.
Quick clarification.
just these two that are on the screen next to my talking head. But Austin Eckler was, I think, a very pleasant surprise last year for a lot of people. He was still a second round running back, but we have him moved up here because we saw that Chargers offense is absolutely explosive now, and I don't see it going anywhere. And because he has weapons around him, it actually helps him. He's a pass catching running back, another bonus, but don't quite expect what we saw out of him last year. 5's still not a bad spot because if I'm not mistaken, he was a top 3 finishing in points per game last year. So there's some regression coming, most likely with touchdowns. I believe he scored 20. That's a lot. That's not going to happen again. But this guy, the Chargers show that they want to use him in the offense. The backs behind him are mediocre. He's going to get spelled sometimes, but it's basically his backfield as long as he's on the field. And he is another guy that deals with injuries. He misses 1, 2, 3 games a season, but as long as it just stays at that, you're not going to be hurt in the scope of fantasy. You just got to find that solid backup to slot in when you do need it.
Yeah, I completely agree, George. And what I really like about Austin Eckler too is we have this mindset that he's a pass catcher, but he did a lot of his damage in the red zone as a running back last season. I think that's an area where he can continue to excel in. You know, the Chargers can go down to the end zone. They have the offensive weapons to spread it out 10 yards out, give it to Eckler. He runs it 10 yards in. I mean, we saw a lot of that last year. I think it'll be continue. I agree there is going to be some regression. 20 touchdowns is going to be hard to hit again. Um, but I think that's why he's at number 5 and not up at number 3 where he finished last season.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit of a doubter on Austin Eckler last year. He definitely proved me wrong. I still don't think I'll ever be as high on him as George, but that's just because he's a homer and a big Chargers fan. But
Says the guy who
otherwise,
has him ranked 4th to my 5, but just saying.
that's not a plus to Eckler. That's a minus to McCaffrey.
He said it again, so we're fine.
There's differences in rankings there, but no, I like Eckler. I think he's a safe pick at the end of the first round, early second round, depending on how you like the draft. So let's go ahead and move on to our number 6 running back. This guy is a fantasy headache, mostly for me, because if I draft him, he's really disappointing and doesn't perform. And if I don't draft him, he's probably the best fantasy running back in the league and carries team to championships. And that is Alvin Kamara for the New Orleans Saints. He's super frustrating. He's a little inconsistent, but he is still a top fantasy running back. And you know, if you don't take him, he's gonna dominate. So you might want to go ahead and snag him. I mean, he's been good for years. You know what you're getting out of Kamara. So I like him at this point in the draft.
But you know what you're getting out of him as long as that legal trouble doesn't come back to get him. I mean, these are early rankings. There's a little bit of an asterisk there, but we're going to know a lot more about that situation by the time we get to draft season. So, yeah, this is probably the optimistic. We don't see much happening, and this is where he should go if he has maybe a 2-game suspension or no suspension at all. I think that's a very safe pick, but someone to keep an eye on just for that reason. Other than that, Tyler, completely agree with you. You said it all.
Well, I think I might be a little bit different. I know I have him at 7 and we're on number 6 right now, so not too different. But if there wasn't a legal issue, he'd be running back 4 for me. So I dropped him a few spots because of the legal issues. I would expect him to miss some games. I guess I'm not thinking it's going to be a lot. I'm thinking like 2 to 4, which I think where you're going to get him at that point is worthy, especially if you're allowed to put suspended players on your IR spots. It makes it
And
worth
then
the
don't draft a
value.
kicker.
Correct. I wasn't going to say it, but thank you for saying it. Now, if it comes out in a month that he's going to miss 8 games, he'll drop, and then, like I said, if it comes out he's only going to miss 1 game or 2 games, he might move up a little bit for me. So I think he's very similar to what we've seen with Dalvin Cook and Austin Eckler. Like they're especially with the Saints might get Michael Thomas back. That's still up in the air. They drafted Chris Olave. They signed Jarvis Landry. Like they're putting weapons around there that Kamara doesn't have to be a focal point, and and he played really well last year and was a top fantasy running back with Jameis Winston. Then Taysom Hill came in, and it took him a while to, get back into being a productive fantasy back. Jameis Winston is slated to be the starter this whole season, so I do like the value. But it is the big name you have to watch with the legal issue coming off of the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much else to say about Kamara. I can move us on to our number 7 back, where we're fairly consensus here. Cody has him at 8. Tyler and I both at 7. Cincinnati's Joe Mixon. So we're getting down near the end of the exclusive backs, but Mixon does get spelled occasionally on third down, but he's a workhorse. He also stays pretty healthy. He has his moments. Besides his major injury 2 years ago now, he's basically played almost every game through his career. So I don't have much more to say about Mixon besides he's just a guy who puts up points. Maybe he'll have you a dud week now and again, but he likes to put you up those 25-point winner weeks as well.
Yeah, I think you can look at it as an up or down, but I think the only downside on Joe Mixon is the fact that they have such a good passing game in Cincinnati. We saw Joe Burrow come alive last year, and all their exciting wide receivers. It's just you need to be worried that they can definitely get it done through the air and not use the run game much one game. But I think after seeing it last year, you can tell that they definitely still want the run game to be a big part of their game. They want their run to set up the pass. They don't want their pass and then, throw in a couple runs. They're not the Kansas City Chiefs. They're not going to win it that way. Bro Mixon is still going to be heavily used. He's still going to be a big part of the offense. Like George said, he might give you a dud week. He might only give you a 5-point week every now and then because of the fact that they gave all their touchdowns to the wide receivers, but he's still going to be super valuable. You're not going to regret it. He's going to be a safe running back that you can throw in there.
Yeah, I think Joe Mixon is a guy that I'd be looking at the end of round 1, beginning of round 2. If you're on that turn area, uh, they use him. I mean, he did skip the last week because they had already locked up a playoff spot, but he had almost 300 attempts last year, third in the league in rushing. Now I know Derrick Henry probably would have made that fourth if he would have played the whole season. But Joe Mixon is very similar in my eyes to Austin Eckler, who we have all the way up at 5. So if you're getting that similar value, high powered offense that still likes to use the running back all the way down here at 7, like that's value and stuff you might want to be looking for at the end of the draft. If you want to get one of the top receivers and then turn around with Joe Mixon, I'd be really excited about how you started off the fantasy draft.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, a lot of the down weeks are going to be because they gave the touchdowns to wide receivers, like you said. But there's so many weeks that I saw last year where it's like, we're just going to give Mixon the ball 30 times because we can. So yeah, they definitely want to keep using the running backs in that offense. And then I think this guy is probably the last like sole lead running back without having a major split. And that's Najee Harris of Pittsburgh Steelers at number 8. Cody has him all the way up at number 6. Tyler all the way down at 10. And I'm at 8. So very interesting debate coming here, I'm sure. Tyler, you haven't talked in the longest. Why do you have him down at 10?
I think it's because you know, you want to rate a guy highly because of the fact that he gets usage, he gets carries, and he's on the field a lot. Yes, that is great, but you have to actually do something with it. And that's the problem. I think Najee Harris was one of the most heavily used running backs last year, constantly on the field, constantly getting carries. And yet every week we're seeing like 6 points, 5 points, 10 points. Like he didn't do much with his carries. I felt like he really left us wanting more, left us a little disappointed. And now you got a rookie quarterback coming in there. So I feel like they're going to focus less on the passing game and more on the running game. Try to let the rookie beat you because he's probably going to make mistakes. So we're gonna have to see how Pickett can command that offense and see how the offense gels with him in there, see if it's a new scheme with a different quarterback. And I don't know, I'm not saying Najee's a bad pick. It's more so just I'm trying to avoid him until he proves to me that he can actually um use his carries to good use.
Yeah, I completely disagree with your assessment. That's obviously why I have him up at number 6. He had over 300 attempts last year. He's the only running back from last season in the top 6 that didn't have double-digit rushing touchdowns. He had 94 targets out of the backfield. He's a workhorse. They're gonna rely on him with a rookie quarterback. I know there is some circulation going on that he weighed in at 244 pounds, so he might be a little heavy coming into this season. He said he played at 240 last year. He was listed at 230 when he was in Alabama, so he's a few pounds, and we're talking about the offseason too. So I think he'll be good to go. He's going to be a nice security blanket for Pickett. They're going to use him like they did last year. He did have 1,200 and he finished as RB4. So getting him at RB8 would be such a great value.
Yeah, I definitely am in the middle from how you guys are talking. So the usage is why I have him up at 8 because like I said, and I'm looking at my board, is the last running back in my rankings that is a workhorse back. So the opportunity automatically put him above some of the next guys on our list. But I am worried about the production like Tyler. So like yeah, I get he was like speeding up throughout the end of the season. He did start to look like he could have been a solid workhorse back, but that offense got completely flipped on its head. I don't like the question marks around him that much. There is still a lot of weapons at the wide receiver position, but can the quarterback, whoever it might be at that in that offense this year, exploit that, make enough people have to respect the pass game to get him out of the box? I know he can be used in the pass game as well, which is a little bonus, but just because of that uncertainty around him is why I have him down at 8, the last of the workhorse backs.
I I just don't see it. A guy that was top 5 in rushing yards, top 5 in receiving yards at the running back position, had less than double-digit rushing touchdowns, over 300 attempts on a team with either Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. I don't see how he's not higher on your guys' list, but that's why you get all 3 of our opinions here when we break down these positions a little bit further. But like George said, that's the end of the quote unquote workhorse running backs. So at number 9, we do have Aaron Jones, who I actually, as the Packers fan, have him at 10, where Tyler and George both have him as at 9. Um, Nothing against Aaron Jones. I think he's gonna be in a committee with AJ Dillon, but I think he's going to be used a lot. I think he's going to be used in the passing game a lot. I think his ceiling, if you look back into the 2020 season against Kansas City, when he had like 8 or 9 catches for 100 and some yards, like that might be what his role is this year. Depending on how the rookie wide receivers progress, if Sammy Watkins can stay healthy, if Alan Lazard can stay healthy, like he's going to be a big part of the Packers offense. Why he's still a RB1 in the fantasy rankings. But I think you're going to get a lot of up and down ride the wave with him.
Yeah, I think that's why I have him so high because he has to be. I have him ranked as a big part of that offense because he's going to have to be a big part of that offense. Without Devonte Adams, with no clear cut number one receiver for Green Bay, lots and lots of question marks at the receiver position. Aaron Jones is basically going to have to be used as a receiver on a lot of plays. He's going to be using the passing game a lot, I believe. He's definitely going to be heavily utilized on the ground. I think AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones are both going to see the field a lot, but enough in the sense that he's still super valuable. I like Aaron Jones a lot, big part of the offense, so I have him ranked pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, he's at 9 for me because I think he's in one of the more probably the most ideal split for him. It's maybe him or the next guy on our list, so I'll leave that as a little bit of a teaser. But he's going to have weeks that are going to be bad because they're going to decide it's an AJ Dillon game plan, and he's going to get what 5-6 carries potentially. I think that happened once or twice last year, but he can sometimes salvages a touchdown out of that, and it's like, oh, it doesn't look too bad. Um, if there's any touchdown regression, I'm a little bit concerned, but it's actually nice to see a running back because he stays healthy, getting the 15 carries a game that he does. It's a little frustrating when you're trying to watch, being like, oh, this could be my RB1, and he's not on the field half the time. But he gets a good amount of usage and a good amount of use in the red zone to make him still worth being this high of a pick.
I definitely agree with what you guys are saying. And before we move on, I did think of a question. I'm gonna throw it out to you guys. Um, we talked about the top tier of running backs, and now we're at running back 9 already, and we're talking about not being on the field as much. So, in terms of early season draft strategy, how important is it for you to get one of those top 4, top 5, or even the top 9 running backs in the first round? If it goes 8 first picks of running backs, like, are you concerned, like, that you didn't get one of them? Are you really trying to get up there to in your drafts to get a top 5 running back?
I think it depends on your draft strategy, and that's a big thing we have to talk about. And I know that is kind of a cop out answer, but if you are going with the no running back draft strategy, I don't love it, but I've seen it. I've seen it work. Um, you need to abandon those top guys, get a bunch of lower or mid tier guys that have a potential to break out. But if you do that strategy, you need to be active on the waiver wire. You need to be ready to pick somebody up when they break out or when the starter goes down, or you need to be willing to make some swaps. Like if you're a guy like Cody and you draft 14 wide receivers, you need to be ready to trade some of those big name wide receivers to a receiver needy team for some good running backs. Um, in my opinion, I think getting a top running back is essential, even two top running backs, because yes, there is definitely big injury risks. If you draft a top guy like Derrick Henry, like Christian McCaffrey, you do have that chance that your first round pick is going down and other teams are just running away with it while you're trying to catch up with some backup guys. It is possible, but there's injury risks with everybody. You can't draft solely based off of injury risk potential. And I feel like this season, I could be wrong here, but I feel like this season feels like it is super deep at wide receiver. I feel like there is so many guys that know they might not be flashy, know they might not be like easy number one wide receivers, but I feel like there's guys you can draft in the 10th round, 11th round that might end up being a starting wide receiver for you all year long because of their upside and their potential. And I think because of that, and the replaceability of wide receivers, I feel like you can wait on them. Running backs are a lot harder to replace unless you can definitely snag that backup when he comes off the injury list. But depending on how your waivers, fab, anything goes like that in your league, you might not have that chance. Don't take the risk. Grab a running back early.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'm maybe not somebody who would go running back in the first 2 rounds, but I like the idea in this draft of going running back 2 of the first 3. Um, because like you said, the wide receivers are deep, but there is still that top tier. So I almost want to have the best of both worlds. Make sure I'm getting my top 6, 7 running back if I can. Getting one of those top end wide receivers that can hopefully those two can help like be the carry of my team, and then still getting another running back that's probably in the range we're talking about right now. Um, that be as your if in case hopefully he can carry my team, but instead as an RB2 he's above average. So that's where I'm at. I like having one of those top backs. I would avoid the no running back strategy, as I say this to turn it over to the guy who won a league with the no running back strategy last year.
Hey, it works. I would probably do the no running back strategy if I didn't have a top 4 pick. I'm not gonna like, if I was pick 9, like, I'd probably rather have Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill again over Aaron Jones or and Joe Mixon, or, maybe I might pair Joe Mixon with one of them, but it would be something I would consider. So for me, like, the sweet spot is those top 4 running backs. Then after that, like, I'd rather be at the end of the draft where you can get you can double up on really good receivers, and if a good running back falls, you're in a sweet spot. So that's kind of where I'm feeling draft positions, but we have a long
But
time to.
hold on, before you change it, like let's just look at rankings right now. Like again, this is overall rankings. This is very very early. This stuff is going to change, but you go running back, running back. That means you're taking guys like let's just say Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb right off the turn. Cool. Then right around pick 30, right around the third round, your wide receivers at that point include AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen, DK Metcalf. You're talking about some big name wide receivers as your number one still. You are not slacking at all. You get a guy like Keenan Allen instead of a guy like Tyreek Hill, you might be fine, especially with the question marks around a big name like Tyreek Hill. But if you go wide receiver, take two of those top wide receivers there, your running backs around pick 30 are Cam Akers, um, We got Antonio Gibson, Elijah Mitchell. Like, I am not loving that as my number one running back. As a number two, maybe. As a number three, absolutely. But as a number one, I hate that, and I hate the struggle that you're going to get from that position. So I'd much rather go with the running backs early because, like I said, these big name wide receivers are falling in drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think either strategy would work. It just depends on what you're comfortable with. Like you might be more comfortable with Cam Akers over AJ Brown because AJ Brown is now with Jalen Hurts. Whether I mean that's the whole gut and feel part about the fantasy draft system. So some people really like Cam Akers, some people might really like Javonte Williams or J.K. Dobbins coming off the injury, and they're confident that they'll get them the 10 to 12 points. So they have the wide receivers that they can rely on for that 18 to 25 points a week. And running backs get injured a lot more too. So I think that's why we've seen a little bit more people take wide receivers. And I wouldn't be surprised in our upcoming drafts this season if wide receivers, go a lot earlier than running backs. And some of these guys get pushed down a little bit. But that's enough wide receiver talk. We're going to do all those in the next 2 weeks. But Tyler did mention it. Nick Chubb, he is our number 10 guy. I'm actually the lowest on him. Tyler is the highest. And George, once again, is in the middle. But George, what are your thoughts on Nick Chubb?
This Nick Chubb situation could change a lot throughout this offseason, is what I'm thinking. I think 10 is a very conservative spot for him because if it goes a lot like last year, he is still in a committee. Like I said, maybe his committee is slightly more favorable than Aaron Jones, but they're very close. They're the top two committee backs for me. So that's why he is down here at 10 as opposed to up in the top 7 like he has been in the past. But a lot of it has to do with Kareem Hunt. There's been a lot of rumors out there that Kareem Hunt may get cut as a cap casualty or traded. If that happens, Nick Chubb might get a slight boost. I know there's still a lot of guys in that backfield room that they like that would still probably take some carries away from Nick Chubb. I don't see them ever using him as a sole back unless everyone else is injured and they're like basically forced to. But I think he would edge out a couple extra carries if someone like a Kareem Hunt's gone, and that could just give him like one or two extra spots in my rankings. But I think right around 10 is a good conservative spot for an early ranking.
Yeah, I'm the highest on Nick Chubb, and it's consistency. Like, I don't care if he has a committee or not because he's just been so solid his whole career. Since his rookie year, like, we'll ignore that one because he didn't start right away. He averaged 13.7 points per game, 16 points per game, and 14 points per game. He's had a running back by committee that whole time, and he's still averaging solid numbers. Like, if my running back two or maybe running back one, based off of how you draft, is giving me near 15 points a game, like, perfect. Like, I'm cool with that. Yes, I'd love the occasional 30, which he can definitely do for you, but averaging right around 15 is solid. Now let's take a guy like Aaron Jones, who I did have ranked up here as well. I had Nick Chubb a little bit higher than Aaron Jones, but um, Aaron Jones averaged 15.6 and 16 points per game the last two seasons before this one, but then this season he averaged 11.8. This is the first season that we've really seen more of a like, we had Jamal Williams in there before, but I feel like AJ Dillon really took a step forward this season and really took more of a committee than Aaron Jones was used to. Again, no hit on Aaron Jones. I'm not saying he was bad last year, but you can see how much the committee affected him. I don't see the committee affecting Nick Chubb as much. So, committee or not, I'm still giving Nick Chubb the edge here. I'm still rating him as a top back. And with all the question marks surrounding, is Deshaun Watson going to start? Is Baker going to start? Is Watson going to be suspended? Who's their wide receivers going to be? We don't know. The only constant we do know for sure, and Nick Chubb's a question mark. I mean, Kareem Hunt's a question mark. The only constant we know on this team is Nick Chubb. I feel like you build around him, you build your offense around him. I think he's going to be a solid option. I like the consistency. I like Nick Chubb here a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Deshaun Watson because literally that's why he's at number 12. Like, he's still a RB1, but if Jacoby Brissett's there, like, you become the focal point and you're already in a committee. I don't think the Browns are going to be very good with Jacoby Brissett. If Deshaun Watson doesn't miss, 8+ games, Nick Chubb might get bumped up a few spots for me. But I think we all are on the same page about where we value him. We're talking a few number spots at the end of the first tier of running backs. Number 11, though, for us is James Conner, who I actually have at 9, and Tyler and George both have him at 12, so I'm the highest on him. And basically, like, just the way the Cardinals used him, we saw in the second half of last season where uh, Chase Edmonds got hurt. They finally turned it over to him. He was kind of a bell cow for them. He put up the points. Now, yes, he had a lot of touchdowns. I definitely expect regression. That's why he is, at number 9 for me and not number 5. But with no DeAndre Hopkins, especially that first half of the season, he's a guy that you might want to consider drafting and then let him get a good couple weeks and then flip him midseason once DeAndre Hopkins is starting to get back. Um, they don't have anyone behind him. We just talked about it on last week's show. They signed Darrell Williams at this point. So
I think we're
are you
downplaying Darrell Williams a little bit. I'm not
why?
saying that he's going to be Chase Edmonds last year, but he's going to take some carries. He was a starting running back at times last year. So, like, I
No.
don't see Connor being the bell cow that you're calling him.
Well, I do think it's interesting that if you go to the couchgms.com, my ranking of Darrell Williams is the highest of the three of, and I'm still confident putting Connor up here because I do think he is going to be used like that. I think Williams will be used in relief. There is an injury question mark that you have with James Conner, but we saw it. They like him. They picked him over Chase Edmonds. They signed him to more money than Chase Edmonds got. That was their guy. We saw what he did down the stretch. And that was without DeAndre Hopkins. And that's what I'm saying. Without DeAndre Hopkins again, at least for the first half of the season, I really like his value. He might, when Hopkins comes down, he might take a step back. And that's why you have to be willing to be making moves throughout the whole season.
Okay, so Cody, I have a question for you. I'm going to try to phrase this so it's not confusing. But we talked about James Conner. Okay, so last year we had Chase Edmonds took a lot of the carries. James Conner looked really good down the stretch once they finally turned it over to him. Do you think a big part of his game and the reason why he was so strong down the stretch was because he had fresh legs? I mean, he wasn't running as much in the beginning of the season, had a chance with fresh legs going against some tired bodies to play in the second half of the season. Do you think he will perform just as well this season um, if he's not as fresh? Like, I'm talking second half of the year. I don't care about first half of the year. I don't care about DeAndre Hopkins. Will he run as well in the second half next year, being on those legs a lot more than he did last year?
I mean, I think it'll be okay. If you look at his, attempts per game, yes, they did uptick a little bit in the second half of the season. But, week 1 last year, he had 16 attempts. That got cut in half. And then he was 8, 11, 18, and 10. So he was still getting those same numbers when he was putting up single digit weeks compared to the later in the season when he was doing, he did have some 20. He only went over 20 attempts 3 times last season. So we feel like he was used a lot, but he made work with what he had, and I think similar to Aaron Jones, like you want him closer to the 15 to 20 than you want him to 20 to 25 because he has an injury history. You want him to stay fresh. If they can keep him around there, use Darrell Williams as a split, but let James Conner be their number 1 guy. Let him be the red zone guy. I think there is a lot of upside with James Conner.
Okay, I could see it, but I don't see his carries going up all that much from last year. And I definitely see touchdown regression out of him because he was just scoring touchdowns from the 1 yard line 4 times a game, it seemed like last year. It was insane. So I see him going from he was, I think, the 6th running back last year in points per game. I see a regression just based off of touchdowns, and I don't see his yards changing all that much because we seem to be in agreement that he's not going to get that many more carries. You might see a small uptick, but I don't think it's enough to make up for that regression. So I think that's why I have him down here.
We will agree to disagree on that one. But number 12 to round out our RB1s would be DeAndre Swift. And surprise, surprise, we all agree. So this one shouldn't take too long to debate. We saw what he did when he was healthy last year. He's a big part of that offense. Yes, he'd probably be the number 3 committee if everyone had to agree after Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, then him and Jamal Williams, the way they were used last year. Reports are that he has bulked up a little bit to hopefully, avoid some of those injuries. Big part of the passing game. I mean, heck, we saw it last year. He took a screen 80 some yards to the house. So he has big playability. So I really like that we're all on agreement with him at number 11.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're like you said, we're all in agreement, so there's not really much to debate here. We all agree with his value, but I will say that at this point in the draft, if you're talking about James Conner, DeAndre Swift, or either of the next two guys that we will mention, I think DeAndre Swift might be the most, I don't even know if I want to say upside, but he might be the most exciting back at this point, um, because of his potential, because of his big playability. I think he's a little underrated because of the team that he's on. Nobody cares about the Lions at all, but I think DeAndre Swift is one of the most exciting running backs in the entire league. And if he can stay healthy all year, he can beat out that committee, and the Lions can get rolling a little bit. This dude does have potential for some top fantasy point potential. So, um, I don't know. I really like DeAndre Swift a lot. I'm a big fan. I'm fangirling a little bit over him.
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to see out of Swift and the Lions that I haven't seen with them in the past is I want to see Jamal Williams on the field. I want to see them use that committee because if he can stay on the field for 14, 15 games, I love it. He's going to be fantastic. He's probably going to outplay this RB12 in our rankings. So I'm with you guys, but we can move on to number 13 in our rankings, and that is Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. Oh man, how the mighty have fallen. Cody has him at 13, Tyler and I at 15. So we're talking injuries with him. We're talking inconsistency in the run game. He hasn't looked like the guy that signed that contract, was it 2 years ago? And some of it, you could even say it's age. I know he's not that old, but running backs get old quick. And he's been gotten ringing endorsements from players like from players on his team like Dak that they're like, when he's healthy, he's good. But it seems like every single year it's an injury excuse. When do we stop thinking that it's an injury excuse and start realizing that maybe he just had a couple fluke years, or maybe age is catching up to him because he took a lot of hits in his career already, and who knows if he can get back to that top level.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if it was injuries or not last year, but I personally felt like every time I watched him, he just seemed slow. It
Mm-hmm.
just seemed like when he got the ball in his hands, he didn't have that explosiveness that we saw when he first burst onto the scene. I almost feel like the Cowboys have a better chance of scoring when Tony Pollard is on the field than when Zeke's on the field. And I think that's a big hit to Zeke's value is the fact that Tony Pollard is so good. If if Pollard was on probably half of the teams in the league right now, he'd be a number one running back. We could debate that all day, but I honestly believe he is that good that he could be a number one on almost half the teams in this league. But he just finds himself behind Zeke, but he just continues to outperform him and perform so well. He's going to keep demanding playing time. So I think that hurts Zeke's value. I think this is one of the most split of the committees that we have. It just sucks that it's two number one running backs being split, and Zeke is on the downslope of his career as compared to Pollard.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how we're talking about Zeke. I mean, it wasn't pretty last season, but he did finish as RB6. So, like, I know he was a little bit lower in points per game, which is actually a probably better indication than actual total fantasy points, but he was one of 6 players to score over 200 fantasy points. So, definitely we're expecting regression. I think Snyder brought up a good point. It's because of what we saw Tony Pollard. We just haven't seen it from Zeke. This might be the year that he bounces back and somebody's going to get a steal in the second or third round with Ezekiel Elliott. I don't think any of us are going to be the guy that has Zeke though on our team. So I'll move us on to number
So
14.
before you go, he was 13th in points per game last year, so we have him right at that spot. So pretty good indicator, I think so.
Well done, my friend. But number 14 is Javonte Williams. Tyler is the highest on him. I have him down at 16. He has him up at 13. George is at 14. So we're all pretty close. For me, it was just that they brought Melvin Gordon back. If they didn't bring Melvin Gordon back, he would have been, top 7, maybe right around
Mhm.
number 5 for me. But they brought Melvin Gordon back. I think he will get the bulk of the carries in, like a 60-40 split. Um, it's going to come down to touchdowns. I know they had like identical stats for a long time last season, so we'll see how that is. And then I also think the Denver running backs are going to take a little bit hit now that they have Russell Wilson. I think he's going to want to throw it around. I think he's tired of coming from Seattle where they ran the ball on first and second down and threw it on third down. I think they're going to pass it a little bit more. Uh, so I think they take a good hit. But Javonte Williams, another guy, a sophomore that could have a breakout season. So I still like him in dynasty leagues. If you have him, I don't think it was a bad pick to get him last year. And another him and DeAndre Swift, of the guys that we mentioned in this range, are some guys that have some super high upside. They're just not, safe picks to take them at the very top of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I have him ranked the highest here, which I found interesting because it's not like I'm that high on him personally, but I just think that I actually disagree with you, Cody, on one thing. I don't think the addition of Russell Wilson is going to hurt his value. I think it's going to help his value because if you think about their offense before, um, hey, make sure to get the cricket sound ready. But let me know in here if you were afraid of Drew Lock. No one. Okay, wow, no one's afraid of Drew Lock. Let me know if you're afraid of any of the Denver quarterbacks they've had lately. Weird silence. Yeah, nobody cared about the pass game because yes, they had wide receivers that were actually putting up stats. So it seemed like they had some pass game going, but they didn't. They didn't. Nobody was afraid of Drew Lock. Nobody was afraid of the pass game. They played for the run, and I feel like now that Russell's there, they're going to be playing for the pass a lot more, especially with those good receivers there. I feel like that's going to draw some people out of the box, and Denver is going to try to run the ball more. And I feel like Javonte Williams is going to be the one that benefits more from a heavier a rushing team, a team that has more carries, less passes to the running back. I should say it that way. So a team with more rushes, I feel like Javonte Williams is going to benefit more from that. So I really like his value here because of that reason. I think Russell helps his case a little bit. And honestly, it's just an all around better play caller. It's somebody that can read the defenses better, audible into a better offense if needed, and that could benefit the whole team in general. I'm not saying the Broncos are suddenly going to win the Super Bowl like some people are saying, crazies,
George.
but
I've been one of those guys, yeah.
yeah, that's nuts. I'm not going to say the Broncos are going to win the Super Bowl now, but I do think that their offense is going to benefit a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying that they're a quarterback away from being a amazing offense and a Super Bowl contender. So I'll say, yeah, fine. You're talking about me there, but I'm taking a little bit out of both of what you said is why I have Javonte Williams here. I think it's going to be a little bit more towards him on the split this year. So 60-40 or 65-35 towards Javonte Williams, as opposed to that basically clockwork 50-50 they had
It
last
was
year.
203 attempts to 203 attempts. So
It
literally,
literally was 50-50.
right.
Yeah. But I also, even if there is a little bit of a downtick in running back attempts on this offense, I think the efficiency is going to be higher. So say he gets 200 carries again. So that's fine. But he's going to be more efficient with those carries, I think. So that's why he's going to make a big jump this year compared to last year. He would be a top 7 back, I think, in my opinion, without Melvin Gordon. I'm with you there, Cody, but I don't have him dropping as far down as you do just because of that addition.
Alrighty. And our last running back on this episode is Cam Akers, the Achilles miracle worker. I don't know how he came back from the playoffs, but we have him here at 15. I'm actually a little bit lower on him than you guys are, which is surprising because I just mentioned a few minutes ago about how if he was my running back in a no wide receiver strategy, I'd feel okay with it. But I'm at 17, George at 13, Tyler at 14. And I guess it's just some of the running back by committee. I really liked what I saw for him. They still have Darrell Henderson. They added another running back in the draft. Like, this team always seems to be like a committee backfield. Now, he looks really good. I like Cam Akers. So I'm not saying a ranking of 17 is bad. I guess it's more of the consistency I'm a little bit worried about. He did look good in the playoffs, but he is still coming off of a pretty major injury. So we'll have to see how he recovers after coming back so quickly, if there's any setbacks now that he went right into the offseason and settled back down again. But Cam Akers, solid running back, but I'd love to hear why you guys have him even higher than I do.
I don't have him ranked that highly because I think he's the best running back out of this set. But the reason I have him here is because if you're going to be drafting, you're talking about running back 15. So you're talking about, third, fourth, fifth round running backs, depending on how your league falls, how the draft goes. If you're talking about a running back at this point, I want the guy with the highest upside. And I feel like Cam Akers, after what he showed in the playoffs, recently coming back from an injury, now he has more time to, work on the offseason, practice. I feel like this guy has the most upside of the guys in this segment, which is why I have him ranked above everybody else.
Yeah, I have him up higher than a lot of the guys we already talked about too, just because of that upside. Because I said this during our mock draft show. if I didn't see him in the playoffs, I'd be a lot more skeptical. Now, I see if we had 80% him in the playoffs and we go back to 100% him now, the dude can produce. They are going to have a couple of running backs take carries, but he honestly probably gets a bigger split of the carries than a lot of the guys we've just recently talked about too. So I don't have any problem taking him as, I mean, my 13th off the board. 15, I think, is a great spot, and you can get some great value.
Yeah, one quick last note. It was interesting. I don't know if you guys are the same way, but after I do my rankings, I like to do them myself and then go around to, fantasy pros, fantasy footballers, fantasy alarm, some of the other, fantasy podcasts out there and see where at compare a little bit. And ironically, I mean, fantasy pros has them at 15, so we're right on par. But the fantasy footballers currently have Cam Akers as RB 28. So they have him even a lot lower than we do. So just, that just goes to show, I think, how high variance the running back position is, especially outside of the top guys, why there's a lot of good options, you know, or, the options between 15 and 30, they're all actually probably pretty close when you think about it. But you're going to have to wait until next week to hear about the guys between 16 and 30.
Yeah, guys, and thanks for listening to our rankings. If you have any questions about our rankings, some debates about our rankings, if you want to throw in your own knowledge, tell us who we messed up, who you think is better, let us know your thoughts. This podcast is more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
Yes, it is, guys, and thank you one more time for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm Kerth, and we'll see you all next week.